Welcome to the Smart Driving Cars podcast. Thanks for tuning in. This edition is sponsored by the Smart ETF's Smart Transportation and Technology ETF, symbol MOTO. For more information, head to motoetf.com. I'm Fred Fishkin, along with the Faculty Chair of Autonomous Vehicle Engineering at Princeton University, Alain Kornhauser. Hi, Alain.
Hey, good morning, Fred.
Good morning. And once again, joining us from Sweden is consultant and publisher of The Dispatcher, Michael Sena. Great to see you, Michael.
Pleasure to be here again.
Looking great, Michael.
Thank you, Alain.
Well, the headline article in the December edition of The Dispatcher, just out, is Germany's automotive industry in transition. And it starts out, of course, with a bit of history. Give us the overview, Michael.
Well, the purpose of the article is really to take a look at the German car industry, which for the last maybe 30 years, 35 years has come to the fore. It's Mercedes, BMW, Volkswagen, Audi, Porsche. The cars have been the cars that people want to buy if they can afford them. And if they can't afford them, they would like to have at least have nice pictures of them so they can think about, one day I'll own one of those things, or they can lease them. But these cars are the kind of cars that people who have a little bit of extra money want to drive. And during the last maybe 20 years, there have been more and more people who've had a little extra money, so they've done very well. But I think we have to go back to where not just the German car industry, but the European car industry was pre-1950s or pre-World War II. The car industry in general, between the time it started, early 1900s, late 1800s, was principally in the United States, secondarily in Great Britain. The General Motors was selling 10 times as many cars on its own than were being sold in Germany pre-World War II. Ford was the biggest selling car in the world up until that point, including in Europe. So the car industry grew in the United States for whatever reasons. We can discuss those, but immediately after World War II, Volkswagen, which had only been started at the end of the 1930s, Daimler-Benz, BMW, which had been commissioned by the German government during World War II, just as General Motors and Ford and Chrysler had by the US government, to produce war materials. As part of the agreements after the war, many of the factories for these companies were disassembled. Material, tools, machinery were sent to various places as war reparations. So it took some time before the German car industry could get itself back to be able to produce cars. And what I've tried to explain here is that they didn't do it on their own. They had a lot of help, and that a lot of the help came from sources outside of Germany. Now, we all know about the Marshall Plan. We know about how things were put back together in the countries that let's say didn't win the World War II, and countries like Germany and Japan have done very well as a result of that. But what Germany did following the war and beginning in the 1950s, late 1940s, was they decided that they were going to do something different. They were going to work together to build back in a way that was both democratic and also looking at all of the pieces and all of the people at the same time. So they created this, so what I've explained in the article, the German model, which is a way for government, for industry, and for unions to cooperate in a way, not to collude, but to cooperate in a way that helps everyone. So incomes rise, companies are able to build and sell their products. The people who are coming through the school systems are able to be trained in order to work in the company, in the various companies. And the result is, as we have seen, not just with the car industry, but with all of the industries in Germany. And the point of the article is the CDU, Christian Democratic Union, has been leading the governments in Germany from Adenauer in the beginning of the 50s up until Merkel the last 16 years. But now there's a new government, and part of this government is the Green Party. It's called the traffic light government because it's red, yellow, and green, the colors of the different parties. And especially the Greens have a very different approach to industry, not just the car industry, but industry in general. And they're going to push their agenda. And that agenda is not one that's very favorable to the car industry. It's not favorable to the use of anything other than what's called sustainable or reusable or energy, such as wind and sun. They're very anti-nuclear, but Germany has already decided that they're going to close down their nuclear plants anyway. And they've already decided that they're going to move the date for when coal is going to be burned for electricity generation from 2038 to 2030. So there are going to be some major changes in the way that the government is going to work, and those changes, in my view, are going to affect the German model. And if the German model is affected, it's going to affect the way the companies operate, and we can see that already in the way Volkswagen has been functioning, and the Diess, their CEO, has been how they're approaching the unions. It's very different from the way things were working for the last 50 years. It's much more antagonistic. It's much more confrontational. And I think we're going to see more and more of that. So the purpose of the article really was just to provide this information to the readers and help them to focus on as they see information coming in, to be able to process that information, to make better decisions about what they're going to be doing vis-a-vis the German car industry and specifically, but the European car industry in general.
So the transition you're talking about is more than just a transition to EVs.
Well, it's I wouldn't say that there's much more to it than that. I mean, the German car industry has been leading in every area of advanced driver assistance systems. We don't hear very much about them when we discuss automated driving or driverless cars, but they're doing a tremendous amount of work in that. But they're doing it in the context of ADAS. They're not doing it like the Auroras and the folks who are saying, well, we're going to be the big jump. We're going to go right to driverless. They're doing it in the bottom-up approach, saying, we're going to get there. We're going to get there by developing systems that work to assist the driver. So similar to what Cadillac is doing in the United States. But BMW in particular, Daimler, Audi, those three companies are really focusing on the building it at top-notch advanced driver assistance systems that will eventually be able to aid more than just allowing people to sit there with their hands on the wheel and do things a bit more automated.
Michael, I'd put it, and I have put it in a different context. At least I think almost from the beginning, I've indicated that there are two markets here for automation in vehicles. There's the one market to assist the driver and basically maintain the automobile OEM business model essentially the same, and really focus on what a lot of people had said was an objective of automation, which is safety and improvement of driver experience. And that allows for the 100-plus-year-old automotive model in which they sell me something and then I want to buy it. Why? Because of the accoutrements that are associated with it. And they're not just giving me another accoutrement. I've called it the fins and chrome of the current industry. And I think the German model has taken that and said, oh my goodness, yes, this is even improves this improves the model. And they've done they're doing a fantastic job on that, as opposed to the driverless piece, which focuses on mobility. Okay, and in fact does the focus on mobility in some sense completely orthogonal to the business model of the automobile. It says that no, I'm not going to sell one to me, in which I then take that responsibility and it's all on me. I'm just going to use it and forget about it. I'm just going to be a transient in the process, and you're going to do it all for me. That's a completely different business model, and so on. And in some sense, maybe there is an evolution from one to the other, but maybe not. They really are different, and I think it requires different approaches. And maybe the German model or whatever, it evolves to that, but I think it's completely different. And I don't really see an evolutionary path. Yes, some of the technology from one can be used in the other and so on and so forth, but to me, it takes almost a completely different mindset.
Alan, I think we've had discussions on this before. And as you know, I don't agree with what you just said.
Yeah.
You know, we're going to have cars. Eventually, we're going to have cars that will drive themselves. There are two ways of getting there. It's the Aurora approach, which is we're going to go to driverless, and we're going to get there by doing everything that we think we need to do to get there. Mm-hmm. There's the other approach that says we have cars, and those cars eventually will be driverless, and we're going to get to driverless by making the car better and better and better at doing things that it needs to do. I don't have a crystal ball, and I'm not going to say, you know, one is better than the other. I believe, because I've worked in the car industry and I've worked with the car companies and I've developed these systems, I believe that the incremental approach, as opposed to the utopian approach, is the one that's going to win. But I mean, if someone said, where do I put my money? Well, they're putting it in Tesla, and you know, guess what? Tesla's using the incremental approach. They're getting there by getting its folks beta testing. It's the companies, the people who are buying their cars. They're the beta testers for they're not going to the moonshot. You know, they're getting there incrementally, but they're doing it in a way that I don't agree with, which is putting their cars on the road and letting people test them. But Daimler and BMW and Audi and the other companies and Volvo are putting an awful lot of effort into building systems that eventually will be driverless. Whether it's 5 years from now or 20 years from now, it's not 2 years from now, but eventually those cars will allow people to drive. And then we look at the business model. I mean, I don't think that the business model is related to how we build driverless cars. I mean, either the driverless car drives itself or it doesn't. How we get there is what's to be discussed. But whether or not Aurora is the company that I would put my money in to get driverless cars, or a BMW, I mean, that's something investors are going to have to decide for themselves. I know where I would put my money, but
yeah. So that's really where we differ. We differ.
Yep.
We differ in what the motivation, what the business model is, and I guess I am more of a proponent that in fact the business model drives things in the end. And I think that if I look at whether or not it's an evolution or a revolution, although I don't really like the word revolution, I think everything is an evolution. I just think that the evolutionary path that starts with the OEMs gets so, let me put it in, fat and happy, doing so well with ADAS that there is absolutely nothing in it for them to go all the way. Okay. Because they end up serving me so well. I'm so happy with it. I'm buying it. I'm putting myself in this thing. I mean, you, the market is doing that.
Yep.
And my goodness, there is no need to go the extra way for me to just be able to send my car to you so that then you can use it, because the crossing of that chasm requires the OEM to all of a sudden assume the responsibility. Okay, I think, because
who assumes the responsibility? Does Aurora assume the responsibility for a car that's built? I mean, if let's just take Aurora. Aurora, we put all of their stuff into what they're putting their stuff into today are cars that are built by other people.
Right.
Now we put all their stuff into a car.
Right.
And it's built by someone else. It can either be built by Magna, it could be built by Foxconn,
or it's
no, yeah, or
whatever. Go ahead.
In the case of driverless, it's different. I mean, the case of driverless, we've got everything that's going to go in there to make it driverless.
Yeah.
And Aurora is going to provide that. Are they the ones who are going to take responsibility for the car when it doesn't do what it's supposed to do and somebody dies?
Yes, they have to. Who is? Me?
Well, I don't think. Well, okay. So now I'm gonna let me take another example.
If I ride in an elevator today,
yeah,
who's assuming the responsibility that the door doesn't, guillotine me?
Now we can get to it. We can discuss this for a long time. Look at the name. Look at the name on the elevator.
Yeah.
Is it Rivian on the elevator, or is it Case?
Huh?
No, it's not Rivian. It's not Rivian. The name on the elevator is a company that's been making elevators. There are a couple of them, 3 or 4 maybe.
It turns out there are like 5 of them.
Exactly.
Anyway.
And it ain't going to be an Aurora that you're going to get into that elevator and say, I'm going to put my life in your hands. Take me up to the 110th floor and take me back again.
Right.
You're going to buy that from a company that's able, the deep pockets, who are going to be able to pay you if something happens. And that's not Aurora.
It may not be Aurora, but it's going to be the entity that assumes that responsibility, for which Aurora is going to be in the chain of responsibility if the thing doesn't work.
I think Aurora is going to, they're already owned by somebody else. So they're just going to be, they're going to essentially, I don't know, I don't want to say fold up their tent and do something else, but it's the company that's going to be able to do this. Yeah, the company that's going to do this is the companies like BMW, Daimler, Volkswagen. It's not going to be the companies. This is my opinion. I mean, I'm just giving it to you.
What about the perception, Michael? Let me ask you this. The perception that a lot of people have, probably the general public has, that it's the startups, it's these Johnny-come-latelys that throw all the legacy stuff out the window, that are the ones that are doing the real innovation here, and that it's much harder for the traditional automakers to change their whole way of thinking to really advance the technology. Is there any validity to that?
I simply don't believe that. There's no evidence that that's the case. The fact is that we have people.
I don't believe that either.
The fact is that we've had people who have come up with great ideas, and they sell those ideas to companies like General Motors and Ford and so on, or they work inside the company and then they invent stuff. I mean, if you're working inside a Volvo, I have my name on a little patent that was made. I mean, you go into these industries because you have all of the resources to be able to do that. What's happened, I'm part of this is this whole thing, MIT, Stanford, Carnegie Mellon, I think to a certain degree, Princeton. People have gotten this idea that all you need to do is put a business plan together, put it in front of a venture capitalists say all the right stuff, and you've got money to build all of this stuff. But one of the first things you do is you buy a house in San Francisco that cost a couple of million or tens of millions of dollars, and you hope that somebody buys your company, and then you flip that and do something else. I mean, this is a concept. The people who said we're going to do this and we're going to do it big, either they were working for Google, which eventually became Waymo, or they were bought by Google, or they've been bought by companies like General Motors. This isn't something you just kind of it comes out of your head and suddenly you're doing this. It's one thing to build an electric car, which Rivian has done, and I think they're doing a nice job.
You highlight Rivian in the latest dispatch.
I mean, they've done a nice job with the design of it. They seem to be solid. They're going about it in an incremental way. It's taken them a long time. Looks like they're going to be able to produce cars. Are they worth $78, $100, $150 a share? Is Tesla worth $1,400 a share? Don't ask me. I'm not going to put $1,500 to one share of Tesla. You can look at what happened with Tesla. If you put money in at 14, it went down to 1,000. But still, if you put money in at 50, where it was a couple of years ago, or maybe even less than a couple of years ago, and it's at 1,000, you made lots of money. I'm not pointing any fingers at anybody in particular who made lots of money doing that, but people have made lots of money doing that. But we have companies that have invested a tremendous amount of money. They have the capabilities. Rivian is making a couple of cars, SUVs, pickups. The F-150, the Silverado, these cars are cars that people buy. Those will be electrified. Is Rivian going to outsell the F-150? Ford is not working with Rivian. Ford has decided it's going to do this on their own. They're not going to be taking the platform that Rivian has developed, even though they've invested in them. They've gotten lots of money as a result of that investment, but they're not going to be taking the technology that Rivian has done and using it. But hey, Rivian is going to deliver 100,000 vans, electric vans to Amazon. That's a lot of cars. I mean, that's more cars than Aston Martin makes during a course of a year. I'd even be more than, I'm not sure how many Porsche makes, but that's a lot of cars. So they'll do okay. Will their stock be worth in a couple of years' time $150? Maybe, if General Motors is worth 200 or 250 or 300. But it's a hard question to answer.
Michael, we agree. I think we really do agree on all that. I just don't see, getting back to the driverless, I don't see that driverless, the concept, the provision of mobility with the OEM accepting responsibility of delivering that safely in case anything happens, it comes back to me, as opposed to the selling what it's been selling me something for which as soon as I grab it, it is my responsibility. Yeah, sure, if the wheel falls off and there's been a mechanical that has to be recalled and so on and so forth, but the degree of responsibility that the OEM then takes upon once it sells me this thing and I buy it is minimal compared to the amount of responsibility that I assume when I then drive this thing very carefully and not try to kill you when you're on the road ahead of me.
Sure.
Okay. All of a sudden, and that's because I've been entwined in this thing, me. But once I send this thing out by itself with the thing that somebody else put in there to then make sure it doesn't hit you or kill you. My goodness, the product liability piece of this thing all of a sudden goes through the roof to the entity of that created, that put that in this thing that goes out to you by itself through its autonomy. Nothing's autonomous, but forget about that.
Yeah.
And I just don't see that all of a sudden to go that next step to do that delivers enough value for any business model to now assume the enormous amount of incremental liability that's associated with moving to that, going across the twilight zone to that area, that evolution all of a sudden stops. Why? Because that's the profit maximization, the desocietal, all the people sitting around the boardroom, investor, responsibility and all that says, my goodness, we're not going there. That's like crazy stuff. We're not going through that twilight zone.
Okay, so there are two alternatives. One alternative is nobody can do it because the liability is so high. If General Motors or Daimler, Volkswagen, and BMW are three of the largest in terms of revenue companies in Europe, within the EU, not just Germany, within the EU, 450 plus billion per year. If these companies cannot assume the liability, there's no hope that a company like even Qualcomm, NVIDIA, certainly not Aurora, or these other companies. So either we're going to have companies that will take this responsibility because they've got the revenue base to do that, or it doesn't have to be the car companies. It's certainly not going to be insurance companies. That's not their business.
No. Insurance companies have to make money. I mean, so
do car companies. But it's either it's going to be the companies that have the base that can be able to absorb this, or we're not going to have driverless cars because nobody can pay for them. Nobody can pay the liability. So it's one or the other.
Unless it's society. And we may end up there because, in fact, this liability issue may mean, look at Amtrak. When Amtrak was founded and created as was quasi-public, whatever the heck it is, there was a liability limit placed on what a plaintiff can be compensated in case Amtrak was going around too fast in Philadelphia, 100 miles an hour, and who knows how many people got killed when they jumped the tracks.
Sure.
Liability limits were put in to that. Said boom, it's limited, and we haven't even begun to have this discussion. And of course, the people that have been developing this stuff, the ones that have come out of the Stanfords and the Princetons and the whatevers, the startups, my goodness, they probably are so darn irresponsible that they're only in the flip business. They're only going to carry this part of the way. They're not going to carry it to all the way to actually do this, where the liability would have to actually be assumed. They're going to flip it before that, go on and do another one and flip it before that and go on and do another. So they haven't even gotten to the point where they've even thought about this. And that's why, we've had the evolution that we've had so far. Whether we get to the whole thing, I mean, look at what happened to Uber, who was going to do this. They had one crash, they killed one person, they lost 60 billion in valuation, and then they sold their whole operation for peanuts. They got out.
Sure.
Okay. They couldn't handle it. Where in fact, it is a fundamental need of their business model, because the only way they can scale, they can't scale with gig workers. The business doesn't scale with gig workers. Okay. And without scale, Uber's worth what, 2 cents? I don't know. I mean, let Wall Street determine that, not me.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, the fact is that Uber probably is less in the taxi business today than it was, 2 or 3 years ago. And that, it's in many businesses, but it's not in the taxi business as it was. It
had to pivot out of it because that business was not what they were selling to the investment community at the time was going to be the big thing that would scale. They said, "Oh no, we're gonna deliver takeout." Okay, great. Be a delivery takeout. Thank you for all the things you're doing for me. Never mind.
Yep. More on that aspect in just a minute. We'll be back with more, but first, this is a good time to remind you about our sponsor, the Smart ETF's Smart Transportation and Technology ETF, symbol MOTO. To get more info, head to motoetf.com. On the website, look for a white paper. It's called The Smart Transportation Revolution. It's under the Insights and News tab. Some great information there that can help you make informed decisions about investing. You may know that ETFs can be a good way to spread risk and focus on a particular category of stocks. The website, again, is motoetf.com. We're back with more of Smart Driving Cars and our guest, Michael Sena. Great discussion.
Back to the electric vehicle and all the electric vehicle initiatives. And you have so many good things in yours. I mean, not to sort of jump the gun on it. To me, the entity that hasn't been discussed well enough in all this is the entity that produces the electrons that are eventually going to get into our vehicles, into our homes, into our aluminum factories, into our light bulbs, into our whatever. And the role that they're going to play, 10 to 15 years from now, if now we've had to replace nuclear, we've had to replace coal, and we've had to replace petroleum. And what are those utilities? That's a utility. In most countries, Europe, United States, everywhere, it's a utility that has an enormous amount of regulatory oversight in pricing and all sorts of things. But now as I like to put it, they become the Saudi Arabia of the source of the energy that we all need and want to consume. How are they going to behave, being so much in control of the supply, given an extraordinary demand? I mean, doesn't this mean rationing? I mean, doesn't this look like butter in World War II or something like that? I mean, there's such a demand for it, and there's no production. There's limited production of it, irrespective. That, oh my goodness, how do we deal with that? What are your thoughts on that?
We're already there, and what I've been trying to do for at least the last year is to include something of this in every one of the issues. And when I do something that Fred Dreyer likes, then he sends me a note, then I feel real good, because if Fred likes it, then I'm happy. For those of you who don't know who Fred Dreyer is knows about energy, and he knows about how production of energy is created. And he's a former Princeton professor, and he's currently in the University of South Carolina. But he's really
graduate students together at Princeton. Squashed together, and we've known each other for way too many years, and whatever, and enjoyed each other.
So what I've tried to do is to put this in there, and we're here. We're already there. I mean, if in the article on Germany, if you look at what's happened during the last couple of years, they're trying to close down their coal, but the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine. You need to generate electricity. In Sweden, where we have had sustainable, I'll call it sustainable. I'm not a big fan of hydroelectric because of what it does to fish, but we have burned no coal. We have one petroleum backup, but hydroelectric and nuclear energy have been the standards here. Sweden has been trying to move to wind and to solar.
Is there sun in Sweden? I didn't think the sun reached up that high. No,
well, guess what? This is part of the problem. We have energy costs for people who are living in the southern part, and the lower third of the country is more than 2/3 of the population. Sweden is a very big country. I mean, it's larger in area than Germany. It's after Spain and France and Spain in terms of area. People in the north are paying 10% of the cost of electricity versus people in the South. And the reason for that is that we've got hydroelectric operational in the North. We don't have nuclear. We're closing down. The government of Sweden is doing exactly the same thing, dumb thing, as Germany, closing down nuclear before we have the alternatives in place to be able to support it. So what's happened is we've already decommissioned nuclear power, which takes them out of the picture, and we don't have enough energy that's being generated by wind or by solar. And now there's the danger, and I think a positive thing is that we were looking at hydroelectric because it's doing bad things to the environment, but we should be producing more electricity using nuclear power, not closing down nuclear power before we have the possibilities. And so we already have this situation. And the cost of electricity is skyrocketed at the same time as people are putting money into, the government is putting money into subsidizing people to buy electric cars. The cost of fueling those cars with electricity is just going through the roof. And this is not just in Sweden. This is occurring everywhere, and it's now. We've got to get, people have got to get a grip on this, and you call up your buddy Joe Biden and tell him, look, look at what's going on in Sweden.
I was at the Florida AV conference past couple of days, which was half AV, half EVs. And sort of the perception, and a lot of promotion for EVs and so on. And of course, the perception, it seems to me, and it just may be my mind's interpretation of what comes in here to my head, but is that electricity is free. Yeah. It's free. And I keep thinking back of my mother, telling me to turn out the lights. We never had, a radiant heater. We couldn't afford it because, put on another sweater. All right. And of course, a very small black and white TV. Why? And you had to turn it off and make sure it doesn't like instant on, because it would have to, continue to use it. I mean, electricity, at least in my lifetime, which is too damn long or whatever, and goes back way far, was really expensive.
Yes.
Okay. The perception now is that sucker's free, it seems. And it seems to me that if I look at the burden on those that are actually getting it to where I might use it, are sitting there, and they're going to be controlling the rationing, for which, if I think of the Enrons of this world, man, they're all out of the financial engineering part of operations research and financial engineering. They know they're going to make money off this. When you have supply demand, and it's all about money. And what the hell is the pricing going to look like if it's as bad as it is already in Sweden? What the heck does the pricing look like for these electrons? And am I going to really be able to put myself off the grid? I mean, how many acres of whatever am I going to need? Where to do what, whatever, so that the Enrons of that world aren't like, you talk about something I'm scared about. Holy macro, man! Whoa!
Yeah. Yes. So if you want a comparison of something that's pre this era, just look at what's going on with gas coming from Russia into Germany. This is another energy source. Look at the geopolitical situation that was created with this. Germany and Angela Merkel, it's coming into her jurisdiction. It's the gas line is ending where her jurisdiction. Yeah, that's something neat. And remember who's on the board of Gazprom. The same thing is going to happen. This is going to be a major issue. The other thing is that where are all the solar panels being made? Yeah. All those solar panels are coming from someplace.
Guess where?
We know where it is. They're all coming from China. They used to come from Germany.
Yeah.
And then suddenly China's in the solar panel business, and they've just completely taken over the market. Wind turbines, same sort of stuff that's going on with with wind turbines. So your analogy that that this is going to be the next OPEC,
It's the next OPEC.
Totally agree.
It's the
Totally
next
agree.
OPEC, and my goodness, the amount of influence they're going to have over this. You just look at the way they do pricing now with what they do. They have all this variable pricing and low and balanced demand. They tell you to do that, and they have all their algorithms and da. And guess what? I mean, in the end, they are reaching into my pocket like there's no tomorrow.
Exactly.
And they put on the feeling that this is like, oh, it's wind and it's sun and it's free and it's available and it's whatever, and
I'm gonna leave you with one thought, because I've got another meeting that I've got to get to, but I'm gonna leave you with one thought.
Yeah.
In the next issue of the Dispatcher, I'm going to discuss something that sounds really crazy.
More crazy than what we've been doing.
More crazy than a lot of other things that I've been discussing. And I'm looking out the window right now, and I've got a number of oak trees out there. Those oak trees live on CO2. Why can't we? Why can't we fuel our cars by simply taking the CO2 out of the air and not using it like, the problem we have with hydrogen and other fuels is we have to turn it into something, and in order to turn it into something, we have to use electricity. So why not just use electricity? This is the Elon Musk idea. He disses hydrogen because you have to use electricity to make hydrogen. Why don't you just use the electricity to power the car? That's very simple.
Hydrogen, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So the crazy idea, you're going to have to wait. I've only gotten the start of this. Why don't we
on this?
Yeah, I'm going to get Fred in. He's not in there yet. The
crazies are going to be out.
The idea is going to be not to go through the generation of electricity, but to go right to the sugar. From CO2 to sugar, burn the sugar, and then we're good to go. So there's so many. The point is that there are so many alternatives that people should be working on. There's so many different ways of approaching this. It's not just simply a matter of saying battery electric vehicles are the solution. Let's go out there and get all these electric cars out. And then, well, how are we going to generate the electricity? Just as you said. How are we going to pay for all the electricity? What happens if climate change is really the problem? What happens if the sun stops shining? What happens if the wind stops blowing? Or if it only blows half of the year?
Batteries, but where does the cobalt come from? But whatever, we don't.
And where does the cobalt and the?
We don't want
all of that stuff. We don't want to go there.
Way back, I decided I was going to make candy out of sugar in my mother's kitchen. Okay.
Uh-huh.
And I made such a mess trying to burn sugar that, holy hell, I don't know. She spanked me. Oh my goodness. It was like terrible. Yeah. I mean,
wait a minute. That's abuse, Alain.
What kind of mess are we going to create with sugar and go directly to the sugar, Michael? Oh,
I'll talk to Fred.
Anyway, this has been so much fun, but seriously, people read the Dispatcher. I mean,
and we've got a great tease for a month from now when Michael's back.
No, read this one.
Well, what I mean is he's teased what's to come.
Yeah. Anyway. Oh, okay.
Mike. Yeah.
Thank you again, Michael, for taking the time with us.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Very enjoyable. My readers enjoy this.
Well, good. We enjoy it, so I'm glad the readers enjoy it too. I mean, look, these are very serious issues, okay, and they still require a heck of a lot of thought, and it's not easy. It is not easy. Okay, if it was, we wouldn't be having so much fun with it, right?
Exactly.
The website is michaelsena.com. Thank you also to our sponsor, the Smart ETF's Smart Transportation and Technology ETF. The ticker symbol for the ETF is MOTO. You can get more info at motoetf.com. We're at smartdrivingcar.com. You can find us on Anchor FM, Spotify, TuneIn, Apple, Google, Spreaker, SoundCloud, wherever you turn to for podcasts, and your smart speaker can play us too. You can find my tech reports at techstination.com. I'm Fred Fishkin along with Alain Kornhauser. Thank you for listening or watching, and please stay safe.
And have a great December, everybody. We're into December. This is about to be over, I hope. Never mind.